This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
We're just going to dive right back in head first to the timeline. And this is where the fuckery continues in Virginia and other areas. So, Beth, what have you got for us? Well, they're snipers.
Well, first of all, there was some fuckery in the last episode because I have to make a correction.
What?
This is funny. I made fun of an article that said Malvo's fingerprint was found on a magazine about weapons rather than a weapons magazine. And, well, the joke's on me because it actually was a magazine about weapons.
Oh, like a paper read-through magazine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It was called Guns and Ammo. Guns and Ammo magazine.
I'm just going to call you Egg Boy.
Oh.
Eggs on your face.
Eggs on my face. That's right.
That's
so,
minor.
It seemed ridiculous. And I was imagining Malvo sitting in the parking lot reading a magazine, but apparently he had it like in his back pocket and it fell out when he ran from the scene.
Oh.
Which is still pretty dumb. But
well, criminals,
He was a teenager. Yeah.
Yes. He was a young man.
So getting back into the story, in part 1, we discussed the setting, Washington, D.C., the timeline. The victims were 17 in total. The perps, John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo. What we know of their early life and the crimes. And now we're picking it back up at the first crimes of the spree that began with a series of single shot attacks to people doing regular things like mowing the grass, sitting on a park bench, reading, getting gas, vacuuming the car, and walking down the street. The killers were leaving cryptic messages at the scene, and by now they have claimed at least 6 victims in the 2 days when they arrived in the DMV.
Oh, me, oh my. So we left off last week on October 3rd, 2002. Now, the next day, October 4th, Malvo and Muhammad started covering a wider area and then started taking 2 or 3 days between shootings. On October 4th, 43-year-old part-time substitute teacher Caroline Sewell was wounded in the chest at 2:30 p.m. in the parking lot of a Michael's store in Spotsylvania, which doesn't sound like a real place, but apparently it is. While she was putting her purchases in her minivan, as she was closing the car door, she felt pain in her back and heard something hit her car. She realized that she had been shot and fell to the ground. A bullet pierced her lung, diaphragm, and liver, but she survived. Ballistics later tied the bullet that was removed from her body to Muhammad's Bushmaster rifle.
By this point, hundreds of journalists had converged to cover the unfolding events. School officials reassured the public that they were taking every measure possible to protect children by tightening security and canceling all outdoor activities. And on October 7th, Montgomery County, Maryland police held a news conference to announce that police officers had been posted at schools for protection. The officers were placed at schools as a deterrent, but also to give the public peace of mind.
But it appears they were only placed at the white schools, because let me tell you what happened after this. Shortly afterwards, at 8:09 a.m., Iron Brown, a 13-year-old student, was shot in the chest and critically wounded as he arrived at the Benjamin Tasker Middle School in Bowie, Maryland. Now, Brown's name was initially concealed from the public because he was a minor, but later it was revealed. Now, Brown is he's a I'm not exactly sure, but he's a person of color. So I'm not sure what his makeup is or how he identifies, but he's not white. By the way, he was kicked off the school bus for eating candy and would have never been in the position he was in if the racist bus driver had not kicked him off. So, hello, and welcome to Culture Corner with Beth and Wendy. This is an example of over-policing of black and brown kids for doing regular, schmegular, degular ass things. One source said that the school bus rules must have been really strict. Oh my God, they said. Guess what color those podcast hosts were. But I'm convinced that they were actually just racist and saw the one black and brown kid breaking the rules, given his skin color and his actions, and felt it to be unacceptable and worthy of harsh punishment. Bias is dangerous, very dangerous. And unfortunately, when a group of white kids are playing, it's seen as just playing, harmless playing. They're having fun. And when a group of little black kids are playing, it's perceived as violent. And your biases determine how you view that. A report in 2018 found that black students in K through 12 schools are far more likely to be disciplined, whether through suspension or referral to law enforcement, than their counterparts of other races. Black boys are 3 times as likely to get suspended compared to white boys, and black girls are 6 times as likely to face suspension in school than their white counterparts. I mean, black girls get suspended for things like having an attitude. When all they did was like roll their eyes or give somebody a side eye. So it the teachers need to be are educated on
definitely.
Maybe some what do you call that? What did Starbucks do when they close? What is that called? Racial or I don't know, just training on
re-education or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So everybody stay in school, up with hope, down with dope.
So because Iron had been barred from the school bus, Tanya Brown, Iron's aunt, drove him to school and dropped him off. After he was shot, Iron walked back to his aunt's car. He told me, "I've been shot." I didn't believe him at first, she said. Then she saw a hole in his shirt and a dark stain, apparently blood. Brown, who was a nurse, decided to drive her nephew to the urgent care center almost instinctively.
Shout out to this aunt for looking out for this little boy. This was amazing. She called 911 on the way and calmly explained to the dispatcher that she was driving Iron to the clinic with his cries audible in the background. Oh no.
I know.
If anybody has heard that 911 call, post it on our Facebook page or let us know where we can find it. At one point, she told the boy, "You're not going to die." And then he told me that he loved me, she said.
Martin Eichelberger, the doctor at Children's Hospital in Washington who later operated on the boy, said he removed the spleen and parts of his liver and pancreas, but the bullet that entered Brown's left chest missed the heart and lungs. Eichelberger said Brown had lost a tremendous amount of blood. He said Tanya Brown's decision to transport her nephew herself rather than wait for an ambulance helped save his life, and Brown survived the attack. Thank God.
That's awesome. I'm going to give a round of applause to Auntie Tanya Brown.
Yeah, and the youngest victim.
Sorry, this applause track is very
goes on
long.
Forever.
I should find another one. Okay. So shout out to you, Tanya Brown. Thank you. Yes. Iron was the youngest victim, 13. The school where Brown was shot is in Prince George's County, where officers had not, I repeat, had not been posted to protect children before Iron was shot. They were posted at a lot of other schools, but not this one. I looked into the statistics for this school district, and it is like 60% Black, and 20% of the students are English language learners. I don't know, but perhaps that had something to do with why the hoe-ass authorities hadn't put police protection at the school. At this crime scene, the authorities found that, they found a big ballpoint pen barrel in a field less than 100 yards from the shooting. Muhammad's DNA was on the barrel. They also found shell casing as well as tarot card, the death card, inscribed with the phrase, "Call me God," on the front, and on the separate lines on the back, "For you, Mr. Police." Code, "Call me God, do not release to the press." And Malvo's DNA was later found on that tarot card. Now, despite police efforts to honor the request not to release information about the card to the press, details were made public by WUSA TV and then the Washington Post just one day later, which kind of reminded me of the Zodiac Killer, which is in the news now because of that new podcast that's out about him.
Yeah. I watched a documentary about this, and it seemed like the press was leaking a lot of information, and they were all up in the police's business on this case, and they could have messed some things up. And I suspect that probably Iron's name was released by the press when they weren't supposed to. I don't know, but apparently they were all up in everybody's business. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so this was 2002. And so we had 9/11 not maybe a year earlier, right? That was 2001, 9/11, 2001.
Right.
So now we're October 2002. And I think everybody was just on like, do you remember the colors that they had on the news? Everybody was like, we were in a state of red at all times, or like a state of orange at all times. And so this just kind of,
everybody was freaking out.
Fire. Everybody was freaking out. Yeah.
On October 8th, a Baltimore police officer encountered Muhammad, who was sleeping in his Caprice while parked at a service station. The officer ordered Muhammad out of the car, but let him go after Muhammad produced a Washington state driver's license. This was the third encounter Muhammad had with the police during the crime spree. He had also been questioned 2 other times, but let go because there was nothing showing he had any warrants, and the car was registered to him, so they let him go. And none of these encounters held any particular significance to the police officers at the time. They basically just thought he was a homeless guy living out of his car, which he was.
Yeah, but it's crazy. It's from my perspective as a Black woman in America, it's weird that this man would encounter the police 3 times and walk away like totally unscathed. Like nothing happened to him. No ticket, nothing. Killing, nothing. Like he just, and I'm wondering what his driver's license said. Yeah. What is it? Did his driver's license say Muhammad on it?
Probably.
Or did it have his previous last name? So I don't know, but it is quite unusual for the cops not to fuck with you when you encounter them as a person of color in the United States. On October 9th at 8:18 p.m., 53-year-old civil engineer Dean Harold Myers was shot dead while pumping gasoline near the city of Manassas. Ballistics later established that the bullet that killed him entered behind his left ear, and then fragmenting came from John Muhammad's Bushmaster rifle. The wound was consistent with a bullet fired from a high-velocity rifle.
Officer Stephen Bailey responded to a Bob Evans restaurant across the street from the shooting and began stopping cars as they left the parking lot in order to question the occupants. He stopped a Chevrolet Caprice with tinted windows and asked the occupant, who he later identified as John Muhammad, if he had heard or seen anything. Muhammad responded that he had not seen anything, and the officer let him proceed on his way. On that parking lot, the police found a map of Baltimore. The fingerprints of both Muhammad and Malvo were later found on that map. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention was that they were looking for two white guys in a van, a white van, because a couple of eyewitnesses at a few different scenes had seen a couple of white guys in a white van driving off, and the profilers assumed that this was a white guy. So
Yes.
that's probably why there wasn't any red flags when they stopped him, because they weren't looking for a black guy. They were looking for a white guy. They weren't looking for a Caprice. They were looking for a van. So
yeah, I guess in the context of this terrifying ordeal, they were looking for a white guy. But I still don't think that police who had the opportunity to pull over a person of color would be like, we're just looking for white guys right now. So I'm just gonna let you go. Like I don't understand.
It's
like,
baffling
this is
to you.
This is an enigma. This is baffling. This is
what the fuck?
Is enigma the right word? I don't know. It just seems weird. Like it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. They still if they can
hassle people of color,
or hassle people of color, then they will. So but yeah, another police encounter. Are you fucking kidding me? So on on the morning of October 11th, at 9:30 a.m., 53-year-old businessman Kenneth Bridges was shot dead while pumping fuel near Fredericksburg. And on October 14th at 9:15 p.m., 47-year-old Linda Franklin, an FBI intelligence analyst, was shot dead in a covered parking lot at a Home Depot in Fairfax County, Virginia. By this point, gas stations had begun to put tarps up to conceal their customers. Whoa.
Yeah.
Malvo and Muhammad, extreme measures. Malvo and Muhammad did not commit any more shootings for 5 days.
On October 19th at 8 p.m., Jeffrey and Stephanie Hopper were leaving the Ponderosa Steakhouse in Ashland. They had traveled south from Pennsylvania and had deliberately avoided stopping for gas in the Washington, D.C. area because of the rash of sniper shootings. As the two walked to their car, Jeffrey Hopper heard an enormous explosion and realized that he'd been shot in the stomach. His wife, Stephanie, called out to passerby who phoned an ambulance.
After extended hospitalization, he survived. Whew. But he lost most of his stomach and part of his pancreas. The ballistics examination revealed that the bullet taken from his stomach had been fired from John Muhammad's Bushmaster rifle. In a wooded area across from the Ponderosa, the police recovered a shell casing and a Cinna raisin bag.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but
some snacks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe they were eating snacks. I don't know.
Yeah.
Both Malvo's fingerprints and Malvo's DNA were found on the Cinna raisin bag.
And tacked to a tree was a Ziploc bag with a note inside. Malvo's DNA was on the Ziploc bag. The note bore the words, "For you, Mr. Police, call me God. Do not release to the press." On the back was a further note which referred to phone calls that had been placed to the police and to a priest in Ashland. Those calls had demanded $10 million in ransom money in order for the killings to stop. That note concluded, "P.S. Your children are not safe anywhere at any time." The note used the words "we" and "us" repeatedly, indicating to authorities that they were looking for more than one killer. It also gave police a phone number to call to coordinate the ransom.
Oh, okay. Well, on October 21st, Richmond area police arrested two men, one with a white van outside a gas station. The men turned out to be illegal immigrants with no connection to the shooter, and they were remanded in the custody of what was then the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which subsequently deported them.
That's awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next day, October 22nd, bus driver Conrad Johnson, 35, was shot at 5:56 a.m. while standing on the steps of his bus in Aspen Hill, Maryland. Johnson later died of his injuries.
Oh, no.
Yeah. While no shootings occurred on October 23rd, on that day, ballistics experts confirmed Johnson as the 10th fatality in the Beltway shootings. With the murder of Conrad Jackson, the killings in the Washington area suburbs came to an end.
I just gotta say, it's interesting. So I'm like watching. I just watched the Atlanta Murders new documentary that was on TV this weekend, and it took 16 murders of 10 Black kids for people to take action. Now, this is obviously a different time, but boy, oh boy, were the police on it. I mean, they were not gonna let this go on for much longer.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just think it's interesting.
Just comparing the two. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, well, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts, and on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.
From DNA testing to the Dixie Mafia, Crime Capsule brings you new stories of true crime in American history. I'm your host, Benjamin Morris. Join us for exclusive interviews with authors from Arcadia Publishing, writing the hottest books on the most chilling stories of our country's past. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts or on evergreenpodcasts.com. Crime Capsule. History so interesting, it's criminal.
So now we're going to get into the investigation. So people say in DC, they were shook. And I believe that was an understatement. Profiles suggested people should be on the lookout for an angry white male in his 20s and 30s who hated authority in a white van in the DC area were wrong. Clearly, that's racist and very wrong. ATF, FBI, Secret Service, and multiple local agencies working on the investigation. And they were not being messy hosts. They were actually working together. So there were all these agencies that were working together. Nobody was being a messy hoe. And they hired extra people to work call centers and take tips. The killers actually called the tip line themselves, but I think the person on the line thought that they were joking, so they were hung up on. So
yeah, they had also the documentary I watched. They had a lot of trouble with the phone lines. A lot of people got hung up on. So
yeah,
a lot of people were calling.
I don't know why I'm laughing. Sorry. Inappropriate.
It was not going real well with the tip line.
No, but they tried. They tried. They tried.
Authorities learned that the phone number in the note left at the scene at the Ponderosa Steakhouse, where Jeffrey Hopper had been shot, was actually that of a payphone near the restaurant. Authorities had the media deliver a message to the snipers, asking them to call that number, and the FBI arranged to reroute and monitor any calls to it. A call was received at 7:57 a.m. on October 21st. The caller said hello twice, and then it sounded as if a tape-recorded message was being played. The message referred to earlier demands and concluded with the warning, "Your children are not safe." The number was traced, and 2 men were arrested at a payphone. They also had a white van. But guess what? They had the wrong phone booth.
Hello from the other side. must have snapped 1,000 times to tell you. What do they say? Your children are not safe. It don't matter. Anyway, I shouldn't go on.
Yeah, so the phone booth that they should have converged on was across the street. So that got all fucked
Whoopsies.
up. Yeah.
Hello from the other side. Yeah, of the street. Other
Yeah,
side of the street, y'all. So between October 15th and October 21st, 4 telephone calls were received by the police and one by a Catholic priest that threw light on the case. On October 15th, a call was received by Amy Lickoff, a dispatcher for the Rockville, Maryland police. The message said, among other things, we have called you 2 times before trying to negotiate. We have got no response. People are dying. The caller hung up and never called back. The call came from a 703 exchange. The day before the call, on October 14th at 9:15 p.m., Linda Franklin had been murdered in Falls Church. The Falls Church area is within the 703 exchange. I'm assuming they mean area code?
Yeah, that's what that
Exchange
means.
is area
Yes.
code? Okay.
Yep. That's an old-timey word for area code.
Oh, that's the 703, see?
Yeah, see?
Yeah, see? Is that how your parents talk?
No. They
Okay.
didn't talk like gangsters.
I know you said your parents are old. Okay.
Yeah. They were older, but yeah, they didn't talk like gangsters.
Okay. See?
Yeah, see? Wise guy, eh?
Yeah. See? Teach them a lesson. Rip them up.
So one of these calls linked the DC area shootings to one of the crimes where the weapons magazine, it still makes me laugh, where that magazine was found at the scene. So in the call, they referenced that crime scene. And so the police were able to link it to the DC sniper killing. So Malvo's fingerprints had been found on that magazine, and they were identified through his immigration records. And John Muhammad was listed as Malvo's sponsor on the records. So they were able to link the two. And then Malvo was also visually identified by an eyewitness at the scene of the robbery of the ABC liquor store in Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay. The crimes had attracted nationwide attention, and October 17th, 2002, police received a call from Tacoma, Washington. The caller said that John Williams had been involved in a divorce, that Williams had changed his name to John Muhammad, and that his ex-wife lived in the Washington, D.C. area, not Washington State anymore. The caller also stated that Muhammad was regularly in the company of a teenage boy, whom Muhammad had nicknamed the Sniper. At one point, the police asked Muhammad's ex-wife, Mildred, to go to D.C. to lure out the killer, but she was like, hell no! Hell no. There we go. Hell no. Where am I? Hell no. He's a motherfucking sharpshooter, and he will not miss. Come on, guys. She also conveyed to the authorities how she told them over and over and over again that he was going to try to kill her, and they failed to act on every turn. And she was like, y'all not about to use me as bait. Next.
So a check with the National Crime Information Center computer files showed that Muhammad owned a 1990 Chevrolet Caprice with a New Jersey license tag NDA 21Z. It was learned then that law enforcement had made inquiries on that Caprice a total of 12 times before and after the shootings.
What?
Yeah, but
Wow.
police had been so focused on the white van that they didn't notice that they had done that.
Of course not.
Yeah. So a lookout for that automobile was broadcast by the press. Oh, this was another leak The police hadn't decided yet whether or not they wanted to inform the press about the car. They weren't sure exactly how they wanted to go about getting them, but it was leaked
Spinning
to the
them.
press.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
the press publicized the information about the automobile on October
Mhm.
23rd. And soon afterwards, Muhammad's car was spotted in a rest area off a Maryland highway by a man who called 911, and police arrived within minutes.
So now we're going to get into the arrest and the trial. Now, because the darkly tinted windows made it impossible to determine whether the occupants of the car were asleep, the final assault was carefully planned. At 1:30 a.m. on October 24th, 23 days after the spree began, teams of FBI agents and police wearing protective gear charged across the open parking lot and smashed out the side windows of the Caprice. Woo, that's gangsta. Muhammad and Malvo were taken into custody. They were asleep at the time, so they were taken without incident.
Muhammad had transformed the Caprice into what has been described as a killing machine. And I read that he got a lot of ideas for this by reading about the IRA in Ireland, the Irish Republican Army.
Oh,
and
shit.
things that they did. Yeah. So a hole was cut into the lid of the trunk just above the license plate, through which a rifle barrel could be projected without being seen. And the trunk would then catch all the shell casings and prevent them from being left at the scene. And then the side and rear windows of the Caprice had been heavily tinted, as we mentioned, which they had not been before.
They see me rolling, they hating, they hoping they gonna catch me right and dirty, trying to catch me right and dirty, trying to catch me right and dirty. Anyway, the inside of the trunk lid, which at the time of the car's purchase had been white, was repainted dark blue, making it less visible when opened. That is really fucking smart. And the backrest of the rear seat had been modified to permit easy access into the trunk from inside the car. The backrest was split into two sections, and each could be rotated outward to permit entry into the gun port that had been created in the trunk. Wow. I wonder where did they go to? Like West Coast Customs? Was Exhibit involved? Was Pimp My Ride? You know? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
You remember that show?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. Yep.
Police also found a Bushmaster .223 caliber rifle, the civilian version of the M16. Whoa, okay. Did your son give you any insight on that? Why do they have the weird names of guns?
No, I don't know.
Okay. It was in Muhammad's car. All of the DC sniper victims had been hit by the .223 caliber bullets. And I don't think I'm saying that gun name right, but that's how it reads on the page.
Right,
so,
right.
223 or .223. I do not know.
I think it's .223, I think. But
Okay.
I don't know for sure
Let's go with
either.
that.
Yeah. So in the aftermath of his arrest, police asserted that Muhammad had expressed some sympathy with the September 11th attacks and might have been acting out of anti-American sentiment. Later reports, which coincide with a letter he left on the scene of one of the murders, alleged that the crime spree was part of an attempt to extort $10 million from the government.
Just 10 million, no big deal.
Yeah.
So welcome to the second edition of Culture Corner. I feel like we should have, maybe someday we'll get special music for Culture Corner. But I wanted to point out that the media and authorities find it all too easy to name any non-white person a terrorist when it comes to crimes like these, especially since after 9/11. But they all let Dylan Roof, the Vegas shooter, Timothy McVeigh, Emmett Till's murderers commit terrible crimes and terrorism. But those words are absent from their reporting. It's like they're incapable of calling terrorism all the time, particularly when it comes to white perps. I'll admit, we were sure by the reports that, when we were following the story, because everybody was on high alert after 9/11. That we all assumed that it was a white, at least I assumed it was a white terrorist, and that I hoped that the media would call it that. And, some POCs were disappointed when it wasn't that, and that ultimately the media didn't have to call it that. But there have been examples since then where they could have called it that right away, and they just did not. Recently, there were 2 Muslim women, one from the United States, the other from the UK, who joined ISIS and later wanted to return to their countries, the United States and the UK. And I think that there is some debate about whether or not they should be allowed to return, or if they have given up their rights to be UK citizens or US citizens. I definitely think that it's worth examining why people born in countries like the United States or the UK, who were probably subject to racism, sexism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, just because of how they looked or their beliefs or their language, and if that eventually becomes like a psychological, spiritual, emotional beating on a daily basis, which doesn't feel good. And so I'm not an expert on Islam. I know that Muhammad was somewhat infatuated with those, the perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks. But I see Muslims as, I get feeling different and feeling sort of pushed down or kept down or however
discriminated against,
whatever, discriminated against as a person of color or a woman, or like, I have boxes to check that make things not very easy for me, and I get that, how alluring it might be to have a promise of acceptance, or maybe being made to be a hero, or doing something great that will make you a hero. I just think that it's worth looking at. You can argue that those things are alluring, and I'm just saying it's just worth looking into and talking about. These people aren't. What were you going to say, Beth? Sorry. I lost my place.
The people in ISIS have a lot of videos that are directed towards younger people. And I don't know how old these women were, because I don't know the story, but I know other stories of women.
We've seen the story a lot. We've seen the story repeatedly. It's the same story.
That's young girls who are lured over there to become a wife, but they're so young, they don't know what's going on really, and they have all these videos directed towards young people to, like you said, try to make them, build them up, make them feel good, and promising that they'll be a hero and all, and it is alluring to them. But they're being hoodwinked, but they don't know it. They're young,
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I think their youth is certainly being something that is taken advantage of. But I just think, I just think that it's worth having a conversation. And the media, we say in the beginning of our show, is racist. And I don't know if they will dive into that part of the conversation. So we're going to do it at Fruitloops. That there's something more to it than we just hate Americans, or we're just full of hate. We practice this religion and we're just full of hate for this one country. There's a lot more to it than that, and there needs to be a rest of the conversation. Like we're missing something, and this terrorism isn't going to go away until we figure out how to really not make people, I think, so
alienated,
angry, but disenfranchised. Yeah, and alienated.
There's a podcast called Caliphate that's
oh yes, yeah. Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah,
that was a good one. But oh man, yeah,
they talk a lot about this kind
Thank
of thing.
You for
so, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a really
Thank you.
good
Sorry
podcast.
to go off on a tangent, but I feel like like people are like, why would these people do this? But there's a lot of reasons
listen
why.
to that podcast, Caliphate. It'll talk a lot about that.
Yeah. It will. Okay. So tangent. So let's move on.
Okay. Moving
what happened next,
on.
Beth?
So next, Muhammad was tried just for the murder of Dean Myers. Not sure why. Maybe they thought that the evidence for that murder was the best. But in any case, he was tried for the murder of Dean Myers by a jury in Virginia Beach on November 17th in 2003. In the 6-week trial, the prosecution produced more than 130 witnesses and 400 pieces of evidence. Muhammad's legal team argued that he was mentally ill at the time of his murderous rampage, a condition exacerbated by Gulf War syndrome.
Oh, that's a throwback.
Mhm.
Remember the Gulf War?
Yeah.
Though their case was largely circumstantial, there was no eyewitness to prove that he actually pulled the trigger. Muhammad was convicted on all 4 counts against him: the murder of Dean Myers, murder with intent to terrorize the government or public, conspiracy to commit murder, and finally, the illegal use of a firearm.
Muhammad confounded experts and profilers because he was unique. His random choice of victims defied the labels spree, mass, or even serial killer. So they were actually really, really random. There were people of all colors. There were young people. There were older people. There were men. There were women. There was nothing to tie these people together at all. And he was the first Black serial killer of his kind, which is probably why they were looking for a white dude. And he was the first serial killer that we know of to operate with a juvenile apprentice.
So here's what needs to happen is the FBI needs to invite Beth and I to their headquarters to help them revamp their profiling situation, because it is inadequate. I don't know. I can't remember what I was listening, or if I was watching a like ID show or listening to a true crime podcast, but that profiling is quite inadequate in terms of really being able to identify a suspect. And the criteria needs to be reevaluated and recalibrated because they're leaving out a lot of potential suspects. Like, really, profiling is basically, this podcast, I think, said profiling is bullshit. And based on this case, I can't disagree. So anyway, now we are going to get into where are they now? Well, let me tell you, Malvo, who was a minor at the time of the shootings, entered a guilty plea to first-degree murder in 6 of the murders. As part of the plea deal, he agreed to testify voluntarily as to all of the shootings that occurred in Maryland. At Muhammad's trial in 2006, Malvo described how Muhammad clothed him, fed him, and made him, quote unquote, a monster. Malvo said he shot 3 people and worked as the spotter in the other shootings. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences, which, what is the point? Prison reform. Anyway, without the possibility of parole. Malvo is serving the life sentences at Red Onion Prison in Virginia.
On Monday, March 18th, 2019, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear the appeal of Lee Boyd Malvo to determine if he should be resentenced because he was a minor at the time of his crime. So this was just last week.
Oh, damn.
It will consider whether Malvo's sentence should be affected by a 2012 Supreme Court ruling that deemed mandatory life sentences without the possibility of parole for those under 18 unconstitutional in most cases.
I kind of thought that was already on the books as like a rule that you can't sentence minors to life sentences, but
in 2012, yeah.
Okay. Well, a jury convicted Muhammad of the October 9th, 2002 shooting of Dean Myers, and he was sentenced to death on March 9th, 2004. The conviction and the sentence were affirmed by the Supreme Court of Virginia. Damn. have a questionable history, on April 22nd, 2005, and Muhammad was executed by the state of Virginia via lethal injection on November 10th, 2009. And that was really, really fast, considering there are humans on death row now for decades.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know why it was so fast.
I know why.
It starts with an R and it ends with an A.
Yeah.
Sometimes they go on for so long because there's so many appeals. So I don't know if he just gave up or if he wasn't allowed to appeal anymore. I don't know. But in any case,
also there's the Islam element to it too that I think
what's that
just sort of fueled the fight. Well, he'd converted to Islam.
Oh, right.
And so he wasn't just black.
Right.
He was also a Muslim.
Right. So Mildred Muhammad wrote a book in 2009 called Scared Silent, in which she claimed that her ex-husband shot all of those people simply to lay the ground for another murder, her own, so that he could regain custody of their 3 children. After their bitter divorce, some 3 years before the shootings, Mrs. Muhammad was awarded custody of their son, John, and daughters, Selena and Taliba.
It was in his determination to get them back once and for all, she says, that he hatched his twisted plot. By murdering a great number of people all around her home just outside Washington, he would make the authorities believe that a serial killer was on the loose. He was trying to place me in the middle of all these killings so that when he finally took me out, the police would think I was just another sniper victim.
It might sound bizarre and far-fetched, but not if you knew John Muhammad. She repeatedly told authorities he would kill her. She got a restraining order, and once in court, he got pissed and chased her and her lawyers out of the courthouse. You have to remember that he was trained in psychological warfare in the Army, and he was prepared to do anything to get what he wanted. That means all these innocent people were killed just because he was trying to kill me. I still have a hard time living with that. I constantly blank out of my mind the number of people who died in my name.
Mrs. Muhammad is embittered that American society refuses to regard her as one of her ex-husband's victims. And I just think that that's unfair.
Yeah.
She is a victim. She has therefore set up a self-styled help group for the families of abusive men called After the Trauma, and spends her time traveling the country on speaking engagements. And I heard her on a podcast, and I mean, she is a really powerful woman. I heard her speak, and I was uplifted. I got my spirit that day.
That's
so
nice. Yeah.
She's really dope, and the only word I can think of is just a really powerful,
inspiring.
Woman, so.
Yeah. In Washington, some people still point an accusing finger at her, suggesting she ought to have made the connection between her husband, whom she knew to be a trained marksman with a grudge, and the sniper much sooner. I don't think she deserves that. She didn't kill anyone.
No.
Others tell me I should have stayed married to him, she shrugs. That way I would have been the only one to die. And in my opinion, those people are awful. That's terrible.
Give them all the bags of dicks. Yeah, all the bags of dicks.
I don't know what the sound is for that.
I like that one. Dicks don't fart.
Give them the hip hop farts.
Yeah, the hip hop fart horn. So I have little kids, right? So we watch a lot of Despicable Me and Minions, blah blah blah.
Oh,
they do the
farts,
21 fart salute.
Yeah, my grandson had one of those fart machines.
No way!
No, it was a fart gun from the Minions.
Oh my God! Are you serious? Oh my God! If my kids had one of those, they would be unstoppable.
And then I think he took it in the bathtub, and now it doesn't work anymore.
Oh, good. Isn't that? You know what? Sometimes your kids' toys are so fucking annoying that you're like, would you like to take a bath with your toy?
Yeah.
Because once it goes in the water, it's not going to work anymore, and it's not going to drive you crazy anymore. It's
or you're
great.
like, I don't know what happened to that toy when you know very well you threw it in the garbage.
I don't know, sweetheart. Yes, indeed. So Mrs. Muhammad no longer pays heed to such criticism. Amen, sis. You get the hip hop airhorns for being the strong ass Black woman that we love you for. She has totally reinvented herself, and through her victims' rights group, she says she has found her true vocation. She has also remarried to Reuben Muhammad, a drug abuse counselor whom she met through a website for single U.S. Muslim people.
She wrote a second book in 2017 called I'm Still Standing, which she says is for the victims and survivors of domestic violence, as well as those who are in a position to help, but may not know how. She reaches out through the personal stories of how her family wrestled with life, death, and everything else in between.
Yeah, she talks about how her kids are still doing good, and she just again, I can't imagine the weight that she has to carry around.
Yeah.
I heard her describe it, but I certainly could not relate to it. But she was just like, no, I'm not. That's not my burden to carry. I didn't kill those people.
Yeah, and hip hop air porn for her kids too.
Yes, her children who
they were also victims.
When she described, they were also victim, but she also describes the turmoil that she went through when he took them from the country.
Oh my God.
And changed their names. She couldn't find them. She did everything she could. She hired a private investigator, and it was difficult for her to find, what else could you have done? I don't know. I can't even imagine. So,
yeah, she also, during that time, she was so stressed out, she lost a whole bunch of weight, and yeah.
Yes. She was living in a homeless shelter because she was spending her money trying to find her kids. She couldn't find a place to live. She couldn't find work because she was trying to find her kids. Man, the things moms we do.
Yeah.
Look, I like my kids a lot. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe after a couple of days you might.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there you go. And again, I've said this before. I mean, if somebody took them, they would be brought back.
Bring
My
them
kids
back, yeah.
are
Please take them.
wild.
I'll pay you money to take them back.
They're crazy. Yeah. Okay, I'm totally joking, but anyway.
Hey.
The truth about the Haditha massacre has been covered up, but not anymore.
I know you know what happened.
They went into houses and killed women and children.
What are you thinking?
What a mess.
U.S. Marines murdered innocent civilians in cold blood.
And at the center of it all
is 25-year-old Sergeant Frank Wuterick.
And me. Murder in House 2. A new podcast from Crowd Network.
So, Beth, tell me what you think made these DC snipers snap.
Well, Muhammad was a very angry man. I don't know exactly what the basis of his anger was, but he was very angry and resentful. He did have a rough childhood, and I'm sure that serving in the army and his PTSD didn't help him. I also tend to think that joining the Nation of Islam probably didn't help either, because some of their message about hatred towards white people probably didn't help.
It was the NOI that he joined, the Nation of Islam,
Right.
not regular Islam.
Yes,
that is what
the
you said. I just
Nation
wanted
of
to
Islam.
re-clarify because we went into detail about that in the first part.
Right,
But
I'm
it's
sorry.
The Nation
Yeah.
of Islam is not
Not
just the religion,
not
of Islam
the,
or
the
the
religion.
practice of
yeah,
Islam.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because as we mentioned in our earlier episode, Mildred became a Muslim because she wanted to find peace. And
Right.
he felt like he needed to do something more drastic, to change the world or whatever,
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
he got
Mhm.
encouragement from the Nation of Islam with that kind of thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I think you're
yeah,
right.
like you said, it's different from the religion. But anyway, I think it was only a part of it in any case.
Yeah.
I think he needed psychological help after being in the Gulf War. In that documentary I referenced, which I will link to in our show notes. It was Forensic Files, one of their episodes. They said that when he came back from the Gulf War, he just wasn't the same. He wasn't the same guy. So he needed help, but he didn't seek it. And I don't know if the Army offered anything. And I think that a lot of men don't seek mental help. Men are taught in our society that they need to solve their own problems. But sometimes you just can't. In my opinion, there's no shame in seeking mental help. When you're having a problem,
Absolutely
I don't care.
not.
Yeah, I don't care what society says. I think there's no shame. I think you're actually a stronger person to be able to admit that you have a problem and open up to someone else, because that's hard to tell a stranger your problems. But sometimes an outsider can help you see things that are going on. You can't see it because you're stuck in circles in your head. Sometimes somebody just needs to help you with that.
Help you navigate out of those circles.
Right. And I think that's what happened to Muhammad. He got stuck in this angry, resentful circle in his head, and it just got worse and worse. And then Malvo, he was a boy. He needed a father figure, or he probably, it didn't sound like he had any kind of relationship with his biological father. And so he was seeking a father figure. Muhammad stepped in and he probably looked up to him, and there was some psychological abuse going on there, because I read somewhere that he had him on a diet of like crackers and honey or something weird like that. And he was very controlling. And so I think Malvo probably would have done anything for Muhammad. He looked at him as a father, and he was being controlled by him. So yeah, that's my thoughts. What about you?
I appreciate all of your thoughts. I think that thank you. By the way, I wanted to thank you for just sort of tapping into the mental health part of it for vets.
Yeah.
I think being a Black man in America is challenging, period. It's stressful. You're always fighting to fit in, to be accepted, fighting to stay alive, fighting to not get shot, fighting to keep up with your, non-POC counterparts. And for some people, that is just too difficult, too much. Even if he did kill his wife and get his kids, he still would have had felt the same way. Like it wouldn't have
solved his problems.
Anything.
Yeah.
No. And I think that the pressure of living as an American Black man was just too much for him. And rather than seeking help for after his military service through maybe his mosque or the VA mental health branch or his family, he broke and he snapped and he became just so angry enough to self-destruct and kill other people. Islam is not a religion where people kill people for fun.
Right.
It's a religion of peace and love with nearly a quarter of the world's population. And he sort of bobbed and weaved and went another way.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about ISIS and Al Qaeda and stuff like that. Those people are like fundamentalist Christians, like the wacky fundamentalist.
Yeah,
Christians.
I would say they're like our alt-right.
Yes,
they're like our alt-right,
but they're also
Proud Boys over here.
They kind of remind me of like the Westboro Baptist Church, where they're just wacky. That is not normal Islam. That's the wacky version, and we Christians have their own wacky version. So don't. I don't want people to think that ISIS and Al Qaeda that's what Islam is all about, because it's not.
Yeah,
it's not anything like that.
Right. And just, find a friend who is a Muslim, and they will tell you like, no, that's not.
No.
I remember when I was in high school. So, hello, welcome to Culture Corner with Wendy and Beth. So I was the vice president of the multicultural club in high school.
I'm shocked.
Ass White High School. So, but I had Muslim friends, I had Jewish friends, and I had I had friends of many different religions. I can't think of any other ones right now. Sorry. And I had Mormon friends. And so I didn't have any Buddhist friends. But I did go to a religious college and learned about Buddhism, and I really had an appreciation for it. Like it's pretty dope. But I remember I would ask after 9/11 would have deep conversations with my Muslim friends and ask them about what does it feel like? What is it like being in this world right now? And and then I would go back to my Sunday school, because my parents made me go to church every fucking Sunday and every fucking Wednesday and every fucking Thursday. But so I would go to the Sunday school teacher and be like, well, the Christian Sunday school teacher would say, well, here's what I know about Islam. And I would be like, you must not have talked to a Muslim person, because that's not what they say. Yeah. So we there's just this sort of lack of communication that needs to sort of happen in order for us to have a better understanding and appreciation of each other's beliefs and identities.
I learned a lot, I think it was my first year in college or somewhere around there, from a Religions of the World class, where they talked about all different kinds of religions. And I thought it was fascinating. And I really think they should do that in high school. Like, just talk about all the different...
Wouldn't that be something if they did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea because, boy, oh boy, things aren't getting better. No. And we know that if we learn about things that are different than what we're used to, that we're not as afraid of them, and we don't see them as dangerous.
Right.
And so we need to learn about these things.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the terrible things that are happening in the world is because there's fear.
Yes, because people don't understand.
Yeah. I don't fucks with Star Wars, but I'm pretty sure Yoda said fear leads to anger and anger leads to hate.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
So, I think I already talked about how this makes me angry. You said this makes... Oh, we're just now diving into takeaways?
We're just diving into takeaways. Okay. All right. So
you go ahead.
You're done. Okay. So Wendy already did her takeaway somewhere. It's buried in there somewhere.
It's somewhere in there.
So my main takeaway, other than what I said about what I think made Muhammad snap, is that it's really sad to me that Malvo, who was a child, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And I don't think he would have
agree.
committed these crimes if not for the influence of John Muhammad. And people might disagree with me about classifying Malvo as a child, but he was a minor, and the brain does not fully form until we're around 25 years old. And when these crimes took place, he was 17. So he probably met Muhammad when he was like 15 or 16. So he had like at least a year to work on him before he committed these crimes.
To groom him.
To groom him. Yeah. And because our brains do not fully form until we're like 25, we all do really stupid things when we're young adults and we don't understand the world around us. And that's why actual adults can have such a strong influence on us at that age. Not necessarily our parents, but but there was always that person you hung out with that was older than you and you thought was really cool, and anything that they said you're like, yeah, that's cool, because they're older than you. Yeah. And you're young and malleable, and you just don't know, and you don't know anything about the world. So I do hope that the Supreme Court rules in his favor and he gets resentenced. But I'm doubtful given the makeup of the Supreme Court at this time.
Well, I'm hopeful as well. I do want to remind everybody about the idea of the adultization of children who are not white, the Black and brown kids that at age 5, I think for boys, they are considered adults in the eyes of the law and the world. And so if something bad happens to a young brown or Black boy, they are seen as more responsible for the bad things happening to them and more responsible for their behavior, which is really unfair. If you know any 5-year-old, they're fucking nuts and not like
they have no fucking clue what's going on. Yeah.
No sense. They have no goddamn sense. So to blame a brown or Black child for bad things that they were involved in or that happened to them, 100% is completely unreasonable and unjustified. And I hope that the Supreme Court gets it right also.
Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
Hello, this is Gary Chahot welcoming you to check out the French History Podcast. Our main show covers the history of France from the first humans until present. If you liked Mike Duncan's The History of Rome and wanted a similar program covering the land of beauty, culture, and love, we are exactly that. We also host world-renowned scholars who have delivered guest episodes on their specialties, including 18th century pirates, revolutionary booksellers in 20th century Paris, the special friendship between the Marquis de Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson, and numerous others. Learn what you love and listen to the French History Podcast today.
"3 a.m. the comedy horror podcast that holds weekly gatherings around the campfire. Let me tell you what you're going to get. You're going to hear stories about demonic possessions, prison stabbings, skinwalkers, glitches in the Matrix, cult leaders, missing 411, night marchers, Operation Paperclip, Mesopotamian devil worship, and so many monsters it'll give Kanye West a runaway for his money. Pop and meme culture also aren't off topic. A camp where laughs and scares are constantly competing for first place. We're just a group of friends, trying to bust each other's balls, find the best stories, and expand the circle in the process. 3 a.m., the comedy horror podcast not for the faint or fragile of heart. Let's go.